All right, welcome to a new episode of the Scout with Brian podcast. Huge honor to be joined today by someone I got to be a student manager for a couple of years, the Hall of Fame coach, Gary Williams, former longtime head coach at the University of Maryland, winner of the 2002 NCAA championship. Coach, how are you today?
Brian, I'm good. Good talking with you again, and I hope you're doing well.
Appreciate that. So let's update the people a little bit first. How has retirement been treating you? I know you've done some analysis work. You've had a position in the Maryland athletic department, but what have you been up to basically since you left the coaching profession around 10 years ago?
Well, I do some clinics with basketball and radio, a little bit of television, so keeps you busy trying to raise some money for the University of Maryland. Especially the athletic department, and it's been fun. I coached for 44 years total, and so it's been fun. Doing some other things.
Sure, yeah. So when you retired, obviously mid-60s, you had a Hall of Fame career, but you did catch some people definitely by surprise that probably thought you'd coach for the rest of your life. Did you ever have any regrets or any itch to ever get back into it, or are you totally at peace with the timing of it all?
Well, just watching things. I mean, I could have coached probably 2-3 more years for sure, but at the same time, I'd rather leave too early than too late. I've seen too many coaches hang on, and it's not good the last couple of years, and it's one of those things where when you're coaching, you put everything into it, and I have grandkids and things like that, and it's really tough to try to be normal, when you're coaching, because it's so intense, and it's a 12-month-a-year job now, and so I don't regret it. I do miss practice. That was always my favorite part of the job, and of course the feeling you get walking into a big game when it's really important, and you're playing somebody that's nationally ranked or whatever. That's always a big rush that I'm not sure you can get that anywhere else.
Sure. Did any schools ever try, reaching out to you, seeing if they could possibly lure you out of retirement, or have they pretty much respected that?
Well, I think, you hit 67 or whatever, schools start looking at you as they'd rather have somebody a little younger especially if you're going to do a program where you have to really get it going again. And so, there's been a couple, but nothing really serious, so I understand that, and I'm just glad I got to coach where I did. I got a chance to coach in the ACC, the Big East, and the Big Ten, and so all that is really good, and you meet so many people along the way, and they're still your friends, and it's fun watching coaches that you know very well, especially this time of year, to see how they do, and so you stay with the game, which is the great part. Once you've been a part of it, just because you're not coaching anymore, that doesn't mean you're not part of the game.
Sure. Yeah, and your coaching career, obviously a pretty remarkable path that we don't see anymore. You were a successful high school coach. You work your way up as an assistant in the college ranks, while also, I believe, simultaneously serving at times as a soccer coach. What do you remember about those years, and how wild was that experience in hindsight?
I was one of the all-time great soccer coaches at Lafayette College. No, it's funny. The great thing about coaching soccer there at Lafayette, I was assistant to a great basketball coach, Tom Davis, and the only way to get into college coaching for me was to go to Lafayette with Tom, because I didn't know anybody else, or I doubt if I would have ever gotten a job in college. And the problem was they never had a full-time assistant basketball coach, and the soccer coach left, so the money they paid the soccer coach, that was my pay for being the assistant basketball coach and soccer coach. So that was great. And, the one thing about being a soccer coach, you were still a head coach. You were making the same decisions in a different sport. So it kept you as a head coach during that time, and I learned a lot while I was coaching soccer. But, I think the experience of coaching in high school was really important, because I got to know people. I mean, in high school where I was coaching, you had to make sure players got something to eat, things like that. And it wasn't always you really had to scrape to get through seasons sometimes, and some of the players, they really had great potential, and you were trying to maximize that and all those things. So you learned a lot there, and then being able to coach at American U to get a start in coaching was great because I was 32 years old when I first got my head coaching job, and that even then that was pretty young to get a job. So I was very fortunate early on in my career to be around good people.
Sure. I don't know if you've ever seen or heard of the TV show Ted Lasso, but certainly, you coaching soccer, I'm sure was a bit out of your wheelhouse. Did you have to kind of, try to learn the game? Did you know it a little bit?
Yeah, I read a book. That's what I did to learn the game. But soccer's a great game. I mean, the thing you get from soccer is you really appreciate spacing because the field's so big, and there's a lot of room where you can, put the ball into areas where the player can go and react to the ball, and you learn that, and that's really important in basketball. In passing to the post, a lot of times you don't pass the ball directly inside, but you pass it to an open area where the receiver can go get it. I really got that from soccer. I really saw that, and it really helped when you had a great inside player because they would be, played so tough that if you could throw the ball to an area they would go to, that really helped. And guys like Chris Wilcox or Lonnie Baxter, people like that certainly benefited from my coaching soccer.
Sure. Yeah. You mentioned Lonnie, obviously. Juan Dixon, Steve Blake are some of the most memorable guys you coached at Maryland, the focal point of your championship team. But the remarkable part, really, for those guys, they weren't five-star recruits. They weren't McDonald's All-Americans. And, that goes for a lot of the guys you coached to incredible success like Greivis Vasquez. What do you think was it about your personality and your coaching style that let you get the most out of those guys, maybe that had a chip on their shoulder?
Well, back then it was probably a little easier to keep guys for 4 years. Certainly it wasn't as easy to transfer as it is now, which is, I think it's going to be chaotic in the next year or so for a lot of college basketball coaches. And but with those guys, part of the recruiting process, we wanted the guys that would come in and work hard because I was at my best coaching when I had guys that were willing to come every day and try to get better. And that was, as you know, from being there for a couple of years, that was always our theme, was to try to get better every day. And, guys willing to put in the work, put in the time, got better to the level where they could play in the NBA. And I always felt if I had a junior that had worked really hard, it was a good player coming out of high school, maybe not a McDonald's All-American or whatever. But if, as juniors and seniors, we got a chance to play against freshman McDonald's All-American, we'd have an edge because of our experience and because of the fact that we learned how to work really hard. So when it got tough in games, we were able to really come back a lot of times. We never, thought we were going to lose in various games. So I think that work ethic, that's a big part of coaching is to put that in. And you see some great talent now, guys that are, really skilled beyond their years, but they still have to learn how to work really hard all the time and still try to get better, even though they are really good. So that was the basis for our recruiting, is to get good enough to players to play in the ACC or whatever, but at the same time get guys who are willing to get better.
Yeah, no, you see even in the NBA, I mean, Pascal Siakam's a late first-round pick, Jokic is a second-round pick, Fred VanVleet's undrafted. In your mind, is that a big part of kind of the beauty of basketball, that nobody cares what rank you are, what draft pick you are, that, work ethic can overcome so much and help so many guys end up having, great careers in the sport?
Yeah, I think, if you can motivate people, then in whatever the profession, whether it's coaching or whatever, then you have an advantage. And, I always took a lot of pride in that, the ability to motivate. And sometimes it's not pretty. You have to do things, say things that you might not normally do. But at the same time, having guys come back 10 years after they're done playing or whatever, that was certainly satisfying to see a Steve Blake play 13 years, Chris Wilcox play 11 years in the NBA. And guys like Greivis Vasquez, you look at his story, that's almost a movie, coming from Venezuela and being able to play in the NBA for 6 years before his ankle just there was nothing left to his ankle. He had to stop playing, but it was just great to see, and that's the rewards you get from coaching. Obviously you have to win, and the wins are great, but watching players as time goes by certainly is rewarding also.
Sure. Recruiting in general, obviously, kind of a little bit of the dirty underbelly of the sport. I know you've had some issues definitely with it that you've touched on that you didn't like about the way things went. Looking back now, do you think, would you have recruited any differently? Would you have had to recruit any differently? Was that kind of your least favorite part about the game today, or what kind of are your thoughts on recruiting today?
No, there's some great people out there involved in recruiting. Certainly, high school coaches that don't make much money, and they spend a lot of time with their teams. And there are summer coaches that really take care of players, really work hard to make sure that they get something to eat in some cases, and are doing well in the classroom. So that part's good. And then there's obviously, and just look at the investigations that are going on now, and if there's those investigations, then there's a lot of things going on also in addition to them. So I guess like any profession, there's always some negative things. And that's a shame for college basketball because it really isn't necessary. I always felt that we were going to play it straight. Basketball meant too much to me. It got me an education at Maryland and things like that. And I wasn't going to do anything to hurt the game. And I just wish coaches, the National Association of Basketball Coaches, one of their mottos is they're guardians of the game. Well, I think sometimes the coaching profession has to look at each other and make sure they are the guardians of the game. And the pressure to win is so great, especially at the bigger schools. It's very easy to slip into doing some things that probably are not above board, but at the same time, it really hurts the game when you see big name schools, big name coaches involved in the ongoing investigations of the NCAA.
Sure, and you obviously mentioned the transfer portal and how chaotic that's about to make things. I guess there's a million different things you could potentially improve with the NCAA, but if you were in charge of it today, what are maybe the one or two things that you think are the most pressing issues or the biggest things that they need to do to fix either, the one and dones, the transfers, the idea of paying players? Where do you think you would possibly start, hypothetically?
Well, as far as paying players go, I think the direction a lot of people see is these, the best players, say the top 50 coming out. Well, sure, they can probably get a likeness thing going on, and maybe there are some other players in smaller towns that could get that, but they're not competing against professional athletes or whatever for sponsors' attention. But, that opens up a can of worms because I think some schools certainly would put together a group that would put together a pool of money, and they'd start bidding against the other four schools or whatever that they narrow it down to. So, that's just going to be another area where you're going to have to watch very closely. The thing that the people that should be taken care of, I mean, most college teams, if they have one guy that might make the NBA, that's quite a bit. Mm-hmm. The 11 other guys on scholarship, they're the guys that need the education and have to, get through school and get a degree. And, anything to take care of them is certainly the NCAA could afford to do something for those guys. Now, most schools in the power conferences, say the top 75, 80 schools, they have a cost of attendance thing now where a player might get a check for $6,000. It's not taxable at the start of the school year. And that is legal with the NCAA. So the scholarship is not as bad as people think it is. Nowadays, that's changed the last 5 years. They get all the food they want, whether it's after practice, 3 meals a day, late at night. They get as much food as they can eat. Mm-hmm. And you talk about the level of strength training, the tutoring. They get the best tutoring on campus, things like that are there to take advantage of. So it's not a bad thing, but some kids definitely need more than that to survive in college. And they're the kids that when we talk about it, we shouldn't be talking about the Zion Williams of the world. We should be talking about those kids. How can we improve their situation?
Sure. I know you're not on Twitter as much as I am. You probably don't pay a whole lot of attention to the discourse of the general public. But one of the things I've always found most comical is, I don't know if you've seen in the last few years, there's been a movement of people, attacking coaches, legends like Tom Izzo for basically yelling at a player. How soft, is the general public and the media today to not understand things like that?
Tom's a good friend, and we had some battles, and I really respect him, what he's done. And you listen to people like Magic Johnson, Draymond Green, they say nothing but good things about Tom Izzo because they've been through it, and they know what Tom Izzo did for them in terms of motivating them. And maybe it looks bad, it looked bad in that situation where he grabbed the back of the player's shirt, but that's just in the heat of battle. That used to be my coach in college. He'd grab you in practice, and just pull you to where you're supposed to be on defense and things like that in practice. And, the country's changed a little bit. Everybody's watching everybody to make sure, trying to be perfect. Nobody's allowed to have any imperfections. So, nobody's done a better job over the years than Tom Izzo has at Michigan State. And, it's kind of sad that people, are so ready to jump on one incident rather than all the kids that have come through the Michigan State program that are, have been so successful in life and not just the NBA.
Yeah, you obviously, like you said, we're pretty intense yourself, but in my experience, certainly 2 years with you, it never went too far. It never became physical. Like you said, maybe there's a few things you would have reworded maybe, but that's about it. Do you have any regrets, I guess, about how you coached guys? Do you ever think about, what the reaction would have been like coaching today, like it is for Tom when the cameras catch every single little thing?
Things change. When like I said, when I played, it was completely different than when I coached, and so now today it's the young people look at things as you can't be too harsh on anybody to motivate it. And players today, you have to be careful as a coach because obviously the new transfer rules and the transfer portal and the fact that it looks like they're going to be able to play right away one time during their college career if they transfer. I mean, there's going to be 1,500 kids in that transfer portal in college basketball by the summertime. So any time a coach yells at a player, nowadays there's people in his ear saying, hey, you don't have to put up with that. You can go somewhere else. What players don't understand, if they do go somewhere else, that coach is probably going to do the same thing in practice. And, so what did you gain by transferring? And, it's just kind of sad to see when a player works hard for 3 years and a coach works hard and all of a sudden the guy gets pretty good. And because of that, he is going to look to go where he thinks it's a better situation. And what's going to happen, what's really going to get hurt is the mid-majors because I just saw, some players from mid-majors go to the high major schools and, that just destroys the mid-major program when they lose a very good player like that. And I think you're going to see more of that now with the transfer situation.
Sure. I know you have a, current position in the Maryland Athletic Department. I won't ask you to get too deep into them, but generally speaking, what are your thoughts, I guess, on the current state of the Maryland basketball program and the job, that Coach Turgeon's done succeeding you?
Well, this year's so completely different than in any year. There's no handbook on how to deal with this COVID virus and how that affected coaching. And the one thing I think you're seeing in the NCAA tournament, it was so uneven this year. In other words, Michigan had to shut down completely for a period of time. Some schools got to play all their games. Some didn't get to play 5 or 6 games. There wasn't much going on in December this year in terms of competition, and that's where you're really trying to get better as a team in December. You play some games where you find out you're not good enough in rebounding or a certain area, and there are things you can work on. So a team like Baylor, when they shut down, when they came back, they weren't nearly as good. Now they've played themselves back into where they were playing, I think, before the COVID hit their program. So it's been highly unusual. So nobody should be judged, based on what they did this year. I really disagree. It looks like a lot of people are being judged on what they did this year. But, Maryland's a basketball school. It's always been a basketball school, starting with Lethbridge Zell in 1970. And, he had some great teams and players. And, we had our share. And, I want that to continue as a Maryland graduate, former basketball player. That's very important to me that we're really good. And, I think they got caught a little small this year. They did a good job of adjusting as the year went on. Hopefully they get a big guy in next year, and all those guys that can come back will come back, because the NCAA has granted another year to the seniors or whatever. Plus, hopefully nobody will transfer. So, we'll go from there and see where we are.
Mm-hmm. I know you were close with Coach Izzo, like you said, with Mark Few. What other coaches, do you stay in touch with the most today? Which other coaches do you still have a pretty strong relationship with?
Well, Rick Barnes is my assistant at Ohio State for a year. Still stay in touch with him. Roy Williams, now that we don't compete against each other, we're pretty close. Fran Dunphy, who recently retired from Temple, was my assistant at American Youth. So, over the years, Fran and I have stayed in pretty close contact. So, there's guys out there that you have your favorites, just like anything else. So, and I watch, and, we talk once in a while, and it's great to see people that are doing it the right way be successful.
Sure. I've heard you say, I think, Joe Smith and Steve Francis, probably the most talented guys you ever coached. Who's the most talented that maybe nobody knows, due to injury or discipline, things just not working out for whatever reason? Does anybody stand out from that perspective?
Yeah, there's a couple guys. If you remember Mike Jones, he was a McDonald's All-American out of the Boston area.
Sure.
And he had as good a jump shot as I ever coached. I mean, he could elevate, and it was pure. The form, everything was there, and he had great range. And he was sick, and a couple times, and just didn't achieve what he should have achieved. And that really bothers you as a coach. Mike was great. The other guy, just off the top of my head, is Taj Holden. Taj was a big part of the championship team. He played behind Wilcox and Lonnie Baxter inside for us. And he was just great. In fact, all the pictures at the end of the game, the national championship game, Taj is on the court. He was on the court quite a bit at the end of big games because we needed his foul shooting, as a big man out there on the court. And Taj could do everything. He could pass. He knew the game. He could play defense. He could really shoot it. And, he had knee problems. He was a big guy, weighed like 260, 270, and I don't think his knees were ever 100%. And he played professionally in Europe for a couple of years, but I always thought he could have been a pro if he would have been completely healthy.
Mm-hmm. You've had a couple of certainly tremendous honors, since you've retired, most of all being elected into not only the Collegiate Basketball Hall of Fame, but the actual Naismith Hall of Fame, as well as having the court at Maryland renamed the Gary Williams Court. Just how gratifying were those 2-3 things and some of the others you've had, just in terms of your coaching career? Did it kind of just, were they the icing on the cake? What do you take the most pride in from your time in coaching?
Well, those things are very gratifying, and, I appreciate them. I never started with the idea anything like that would ever happen. And I think the thing I'm most proud of is when I came to Maryland in '89. It was just 3 years after Len Bias had died. Mm-hmm. There was problems within the team. We got hit with sanctions where we couldn't go to the NCAA for a couple of years. We couldn't play on live TV for a couple of years. That really hurts your recruiting and things like that. And in, I think, 1993, we won 3 ACC games, and in '94, we went to the Sweet 16. And we had to build the program. We had some help with guys like Walt Williams. And, I had good assistant coaches, and, Billy Hahn and, people like that. But at the same time, we were playing against Duke and Carolina. It seemed like they were winning the national championship every year back then. And we had to really do a lot to get better and to improve the feeling of the administration about the men's basketball team, because obviously it had suffered, because of what had happened. So to get through that, and then basically to keep my job, because people have short memories with coaches. And, I look at Frank Martin's a good example. He was in at South Carolina, he was in the Final Four 4 years ago. And, the president just came out and said, we were going to stay with Coach Martin. Well, that's nice of the president to do that. But at the same time, Frank did a lot for that school in basketball.
Absolutely. You obviously, like you said, you left a pretty good job in Ohio State to come back to your alma mater, Maryland. I know how important that was to you. Obviously, we're starting to see, Mike Woodson, obviously, at Indiana, Juwan go back to Michigan. What do you think in terms of the trend, I guess, of a couple things? First, some NBA guys coming back to college, and then second, certainly something you're very familiar with in terms of going back to coach at your alma mater.
Well, it's really interesting to see, pro guys go back to college, because in the pros, it's pure basketball, as and basically you can really focus on games. You can focus on what you have to do, and it's basically a level playing field with free agency, draft, things like that. So salary cap, college basketball, you can outwork people. I don't know if anybody can really tell you before you go back as a head coach in college that how tough it's going to be in recruiting, in worrying about a player 11 o'clock at night. When you're in the NBA, you don't worry much about your players late at night. When you're in college, if that phone rings after 10 o'clock, you worry, because you know it's not going to be good news. And that's the thing that you have to get used to. And some guys have been successful, like Howard at Michigan. Other guys haven't made it coming directly from the pros back to college, because it's a different job than coaching in the pros. And it's a tough job. It's more time consuming in college than it is at the pro level. And you're dealing with everybody's 18 to 22, not just a couple guys in your team like it is in the NBA.
Sure. Last couple questions, then we'll get you out of here. I'll go one quick rapid fire one. Who's your favorite player that you've ever coached? I know it's hard to pick one, probably, but
well, that's not fair. Yeah, that's not fair. There's been so many good ones. Walt Williams really helped save the program when I got to Maryland. Graves Vasquez it's an incredible story. What he did with his life, coming in from Venezuela and Montrose Christian there. So there's a lot of guys, to watch Steve Blake play as long as he did in the NBA and average, I think, 9.5 points a game his senior year in college, and just see his determination and whatever to make it. Of course, Juan Dixon might be the greatest story, to go from a guy who we were criticized at Maryland for signing him because he was too small to play in the ACC, become the MVP of the Final Four, national champions, all-time leading scorer, and in my mind, the greatest player ever to play at Maryland. I know he accomplished more than any other player at Maryland.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Favorite part of the job? I know I've heard you say the practices before. Is that true? Did you really enjoy the practices even more than the games?
Yeah, you because you're I started as a high school teacher. You're still teaching in practice. It's your class. You have 12 people, say. And in basketball, you coach everything. You don't have at least I didn't. I don't have an offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator. I wasn't coaching coaches. I was coaching players. And I really enjoyed that part of the job. And you walked off the court every day after practice knowing whether you did a good job or not, because you could tell whether you got better or, you just couldn't get it going that day in practice. And, it was great. And then, you miss the camaraderie, the locker room, things people never see. Guy coming in your office next day, you might have yelled out of practice, and, you trying to get that guy ready to practice the next day. All those things are special that, you get to do as a head coach in basketball.
Sure. Last question we'll finish on. I obviously have a lot of followers that are coaches trying to get into coaching, people all over the world, trying to get into that profession. What would your advice be, I guess, one main piece of advice to a young coach starting off today?
Well, you need contacts for sure. You have to get people, whether you're going to be a high school coach or a college coach or whatever. You need to get as many people that you can pick up the phone and ask them to call for you or whatever. So you need all that. But the other thing is, you have to decide that, a lot of guys sell themselves as want to be assistant coaches at the college level by saying they can get this kid or get that kid to come to your program. So that's great. But, your welcome wears out quickly that way. You want to be considered as an all-around coach. Obviously, if you're in college, you want to be able to recruit, but you also want to learn the game of basketball. You want to really be able to help the head coach in terms of, getting ready for practice or upcoming games with scouting, look at video, things like that. And then knowing your players, you can't be this guy that just shows up, doesn't do anything in practice, doesn't really care about practice, but is always thinking about that next recruit. You can't just do that if you want to eventually get to be a head coach and be a successful head coach. You have to know the game. You have to know what makes up, a team and what's important to a team.
Awesome. Coach, really appreciate you joining me today. I know you're on the DC Coaches podcast, right, with Ed Tapscott, Jimmy Patsos, a few others.
Yeah, it's our American U reunion. That's what that is.
Yeah. Anywhere else where people can come and find you? Anything else that fans should come try to look for you at?
I just do local radio, that type of thing once in a while. But the podcast is fun. Really enjoy that.
Awesome. Well, Coach, thank you very much again. Really enjoyed our chat and hope you're enjoying the golf game a little bit and appreciate you stopping by with us today.
Brian, thank you and good luck to you. I hope things continue to go well.
Appreciate it.